the old radio show texts for most of our first 2 or 3 seasons. During the golden age, Hollywood had a tough time. Some of its biggest stars were really huge. In just 2 years, one star grew 10 inches. Another person, who was 6 feet 3 inches tall, was turned down by the army because he was too thin. A third of them fell apart while they were being filmed and weighed only 148 pounds on a frame that was meant to hold nearly 190 pounds. Studios worked on making these guys smaller for years. They took care with the angles, used camera tricks, and secret platforms. But the stories behind those tricks show something very strange that no one saw coming. Mr. James Arness. They called me, and I had heard that they were going to make this TV show out of. The people around James Arness never really knew what to do with him as a child. He was 6 feet 6 inches tall without shoes. And studios blew it up to 6 feet 7 for marketing reasons. But even the real number made him 10 to 11 inches taller than the average American guy in the 1940s and 1950s. The business world didn't want to talk about that issue. It was very important to Hollywood that movies were balanced. And during that decade, leading guys like Humphrey Bogart, who was 5 feet 8 inches tall, and James Cagney, who was 5 feet 5 inches tall, ruled through attitude and careful camera setups. Then someone like Arness walked in and threw off the whole picture. Then the leaders put him in the trenches. After telling him to stand, they told him to sit down. They begged him to bend over. People were told not to look up and see a huge figure in the background. Some companies dropped his contract without telling him because no male star wanted to work with him. It was John Wayne's blunt voice that cut through everything when he told them, "You're too big to work in movies." He said it as both a warning and a promise, and for a while it hurt, because it was so true. Funny thing is, that same giant became the most watched actor in American history thanks to TV, a medium that no one saw coming. In his early years in Hollywood, it felt like he was always walking uphill in shoes full of stones. In 1956, he said that he had never been in so much trouble because directors were always trying to hide him. The lead in one movie was only 5 feet 10 inches, so Arness had to do all of her scenes while sitting down. He was so big that the team dug a real trench for him in another one. Other players would sometimes wear foot-high lifts to hide the difference in height. MGM hired him because he looked perfect for tough parts in war movies. All of the leading guys didn't want him in their pictures once he got onto their lots, though. They didn't want to be the one who was the shortest. MGM pushed him to the side and gave him small roles in the background that didn't mean much. A company that used to feel like a dream could no longer use him. He felt worse about that truth than he told anyone. Afterward, a friend said that he sat down as much as possible to hide how tall he was. He hunched over if he had to stand. He made men envious. But for Arness, it was something that made him feel bad about himself. Someone tried to take a silly picture of him on a small horse, but he said no because he knew it would make him look bad. He wasn't amused. He was worn out. His time in the service taught him the weight that came with being tall, long before Hollywood made him feel too big. It was over for him to become a Navy pilot as soon as they looked at him. It was 6 feet 2 inches tall. And he was a few inches ahead of it. He quit his job and joined the Army instead. On January 22, 1944, he landed on Anzio beachhead with the 3rd Infantry Division. It was cold at night and the waves were rough. Since he was 6 feet 7 inches tall, leaders told him to get off the landing craft first to check the depth of the water. The water was up to his waist. Men behind him didn't drown under their gear because of that easy detail. After 10 days, on February 1, 1944, he was on point duty and moved through a vineyard 20 feet ahead of his group. It hurt his right leg and foot when he stepped right into a German machine gun post. It also threw him backwards. A few seconds later, a concussion grenade went off near him and pulled him back up. He was dragged out and sped quickly to the 95th Evacuation Hospital by medics. 40 doctors and 40 nurses are working hard to take care of the 400 beds full of hurt people. His injury was graded as ZI, which meant he needed to be taken to the United States right away. The cut started to smell bad when it got infected. His bandage got wet with blood. Penicillin, which was new and exciting at the time, kept his leg from having to be cut off. He was in hospitals for 18 months, both in the US and abroad, having surgeries and taking a long time to heal. His brother Peter went to see him at the 91st General Hospital in Clinton, Iowa, and tried to make him feel better by telling him that he should think about working in radio when he got better. Arness was let go from the Army on January 29, 1945. And a leg that would never feel the same again. He left with a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and a Combat Infantryman badge. It turned out that one leg was almost 2 centimeters shorter than the other. Because of his limp, it got worse over the years. During the last 10 years of Gunsmoke, arthritis set in and made easy walking scenes painful. His strength was at its peak early in the morning, so the crew learned to shoot those scenes then. To give him time to rest, they often crammed all of his lines into one day. The strange twist was that Dennis Weaver lied about Chester's limp to make things more interesting, while Arness did his best to hide his real one. Hollywood still had to figure out something it had never figured out before when Gunsmoke became his home. How do you make Marshall, who is 6 feet 7 inches, look good next to Amanda Blake, who is 5 feet 6 inches, who runs a saloon? The shot was funny when he stood up straight. He was much bigger than everyone else. The old tricks were used again. The floor was dug up in secret by crews. They made little stages for players who aren't very tall. They used boxes that looked like set pieces. Later, Bruce Boxleitner, who worked with him, confirmed that the actors did stand on boxes to stay balanced in the shot. When Nehemiah Persoff showed up as a gunman and asked for height boosts to make himself look scary, the clothing department gave him shoes that made him about 6 feet tall. He was ready, but Arness looked 7 feet tall to him when he saw him on set. Arness had also quietly asked for shoes that would make him taller because he had heard that Persoff was getting shoes that would make him taller. He was still a foot taller than him even then. When those steps weren't enough, camera tricks were used. In episode 30 of season 1, Chuck Connors, who was over 6 feet 5, had to look bigger than Arness. This was done with forced perspective. The crew changed the views and put Connors closer to the camera while leaving Arness a little behind him. Arness was bigger than all of his standard cast. Dennis Weaver, who was 6 feet 2 inches, seemed way too small next to him. Stone, who was 5 feet 8 inches, needed help with 2 shots. With a height of 5 feet 6 inches, Amanda Blake was 13 inches shorter. Arness had been trying to lose weight for so long that he naturally slouched in ways that made filming easy. He never said it was for the cameras. He had just learned how to move that way. John Wayne. The company heads got together and thought of the name John Wayne. John Wayne was 6 feet 4 inches tall. It looks like just another number at first. Things start to change though when you think about how short the average American man born in 1930 was, 5 feet 8 inches. Wayne suddenly stands 8 inches taller than the average man of his time, and it's easier to picture how people would have reacted when he walked into a room. It's hard to believe how tall someone would look today if they were 6 feet 10 inches. He wasn't just big. He really was one. He wasn't born with Star Wars in his genes. He was born Marion Robert Morrison on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, Iowa. Before he even finished high school, he had grown into a boy with long legs who was over 6 feet tall. After he graduated from Glendale High School in 1925, he became interested in sports. He went to USC on a scholarship and played left tackle. Back then, it cost $280 a year for tuition, and his grant only paid for 1 meal a day. But it felt like the start of something steady. Then fate showed up with a wave. Wayne broke his shoulder at Newport Beach while body surfing. He didn't tell teacher Howard Jones the truth because he was afraid of him. His sports career was over anyway because of the injury. He lost his funding, and in 1927 he stopped going to USC. Without that strange moment in the water, the world might not have met the John Wayne that everyone came to know. Director John Ford and Western star Tom Mix hired him as a prop boy and extra as a favor to Coach Jones. That small hole turned out to be the entrance to his second life. He found something strange while working at the studio. Wyatt Earp, the real lawman from the Old West who was 80 years old, often went to the sets. Wayne paid close attention to him and picked up things from the way he walked. He later said that Earp was the one who had really done the things that Wayne only did in movies. That meeting changed everything. It changed the way he walked, the way he spoke, and the quiet confidence he had in every Western frame. But because he was big, he looked stiff in the picture. That big body had to be worked on to make it smooth. A trick was taught to him by actor Paul Fix. He told Wayne to walk with his toes facing down. He swayed his shoulders and rolled his hips in a way that looked true to life. Wayne worked on that walk until it felt natural to him. It became his mark in the end. Then there was the strange thing about him that made him even stranger. Wayne had surprisingly small feet for a guy who was 6 feet 4 inches tall. They were about a size 10 or 11. Bruce Wayne walked on his toes like a dancer because he had small feet. Brendan, his grandson. This made him look lighter than he was. Actually, director Howard Hawks saw it too. He said that Wayne was light on his feet despite being big. Katharine Hepburn once said that he had great legs and small, sensitive feet. She also said that he carried his big body like a feather. Even his co-star Robert Mitchum couldn't help but make fun of him. Mitchum made a joke that Wayne was 6 feet 4 inches tall, wore 4-inch lifts, and wore a 10-gallon hat on top of everything else. When asked why, Mitchum said Wayne told him he had to keep the audience aware of Wayne. Even if it wasn't true, Wayne knew what he looked like. It was carefully shaped by him. Years went by. The spring of 1979 then came. Wayne took the stage at the Academy Awards 2 months before he died of stomach cancer. He looked weak. He was 72 years old and wore regular shoes without lifts. He was still much taller than Johnny Carson and everyone else. The crowd stood up. Wayne smiled in a soft, worn-out way and said that cheers were the best therapy for guys ever. Scott James. I'm sure everything will be okay at the gym. There was something different about James Stewart. He was 6 feet 3 inches tall and had a soft face. On a cold February morning in West Los Angeles, he walked into draft board number 245. The Army didn't see power. Someone they saw was only 138 pounds. Based on their chart, a man that tall should weigh at least 143 pounds. He was missing 5 pounds. They turned him down. Imagine being turned away by a huge man. He wasn't too big, he was too thin. Stewart didn't give up. So badly did he want to serve that he changed everything about his life in one night. He ate spaghetti twice a day, steaks, and milkshakes, and he trained with Don Loomis, who was MGM's strength expert. Every pound counted, and he worked hard for weeks to get to the weight the Army wanted. He still hadn't hit 143 pounds when he went back for his second physical in March 1941, but he talked the doctors into adding a few pounds to the scale. He got drunk and ran outside, yelling to Burgess Meredith that he was in. Some say a friend set the scales. Some people say Stewart ate a lot of bananas before the weigh-in. What made it happen? The skinny giant finally did something wrong. All of a sudden, things changed. Back then, Stewart was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, making $12,000 a week. His pay dropped to $21 a month after he joined the Army. He still gave his agent a 10% cut every month, which was $2.10. That small act showed what kind of man he was. MGM had a party for him the night before to say goodbye. The actors gave him a kiss and left. To clean the girls' lips, Rosalind Russell used a towel to write their names on it. Stewart was very good at keeping it with him. Clark Gable told Stewart that he might be wasting his career when he heard that he was going. Stewart didn't think twice. A few months before Pearl Harbor, he was the first big name in Hollywood to join the Army. His problems didn't suddenly go away when he put on a uniform. There were cameras following him around Fort MacArthur. Flashes kept going off even after he was given underwear. One old man saw it happen and said in a low voice that he felt bad for the guy. Stewart kept going, though. During that time, bomber crews were thought to die between their 8th and 12th missions. He made 20 combat missions over Nazi Germany. He was made a full colonel on March 29, 1945. He was one of only a few Americans to go from being a private to a colonel in 4 years. He was deeply affected by the war. He was grounded for being flak happy near the end. what we now call PTSD. When he got back to the US in August 1945, he was tired and had bad dreams. He looked sick because he had lost so much weight. Sleep didn't last long. When it did, his dreams took him back to the sky, where men he knew were screaming as planes crashed. His unit lost 13 planes and 130 men on just one operation. A lot of them were friends. He was 37 years old. But she looked more like 50. Some people said that he was done being a romantic star. Then Frank Capra showed up with a script for It's a Wonderful Life. And that movie brought Stewart out of his own shade and brought back everything he thought he had lost. Things went on with time, and Stewart kept working. He was made a brigadier general on July 23, 1959, making him the highest-ranking actor in U.S. military history. He did his time for 27 years. He was 57 years old when he got into a B-52 bomber and made an observer mission over Vietnam in 1966. The man who almost failed his physical for the draft went on to be an American war hero. They didn't see any of this coming when MGM signed him in 1935. Michael D. Urinella, who wrote a biography of him, said that MGM thought of him as a stumpy young man with an uncertain tone of voice. They didn't think he could sell because he was huge. They didn't know what to do with him. That's why they let other companies use him. They were wrong. According to the American Film Institute, the tall young man made 80 movies, won an Academy Award, and was nominated for 5 Oscars. He is now the third most famous male actor in American film history. The president gave him the Medal of Freedom, and he worked hard, was brave, and was strong in a quiet way all his life. Dr. Gregory Peck. I hope it's not really dead. I don't think so. I think it's been in a slump, but having a height of 6 feet 3 inches meant something different in the 1940s than it does now. Most men in the US back then were only about 5 feet 7 inches tall, so whenever Peck walked onto a set, he was about 8 inches taller than most people. He made people look up, and that small change in viewpoint changed how they felt about him. What's even stranger about his height is that he wasn't always that tall. The book about his life, A Charmed Life, says that he suddenly grew from 5 feet 4 inches to 6 feet 2 inches when he was about 17. About 10 or 11 inches in just 2 years. It was hard to believe. He made fun of the fact that he looked and grew like an asparagus spear. During his time at San Diego High School, that sudden rise in height hit him. Pretty soon, the boy who used to fit in was taller than everyone else. Everything that came after this height was shaped by it. He started rowing at UC Berkeley, and his big body made him stand out in college shows. Drama teachers saw him there before they knew how good he was. People remember when you're 6 feet 3 inches tall and can still move well. That kept making him want to act. However, life took another turn in his path. In New York, he hurt his back in Martha Graham's dance and movement classes while he was learning at the neighborhood playhouse. He wasn't required to serve in the military during World War II because of that accident. The idea that their tough, rising star had been hurt in a dance class didn't go over well in Hollywood. So studios later said he hurt his back while rowing at Berkeley. Peck laughed about that for years and said that ever since, he had been trying to put an end to the story. Even though it sounds crazy, that accident made them famous. Gregory Peck stayed home while big names like Clark Gable, James Stewart, and Henry Fonda went to war. Hollywood needed Maine men badly. He was the right answer because of his dark looks, quiet strength, and huge size. In the Golden Age, he was part of a small group of actors who were all the same height. John Wayne was about 6 feet 3.5 inches tall, Gary Cooper about 6 feet 3.5 inches, Jimmy Stewart about 6 feet 3.25 inches, and Charlton Heston about 6 feet 2.5 inches. When these guys walked into the frame, they filled the screen, and Peck fit right in with them. Still, his height caused some issues at times. It was hard for directors to pair him with women who were not as tall, so they had to be careful with camera angles and shot planning. This problem became clear to me when I worked with Audrey Hepburn on Roman Holiday in 1953. She was 5 feet 7 inches tall, which was 8 inches less than Peck. Filmmakers had to carefully frame scenes so that they looked right. Sometimes they hide their difference by where they stand instead of using tricks. When he played Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird in 1962, everything came together. His height was a quiet sign of something. Whether he was in court or walking through the dusty streets of Macomb, he seemed to stand tall and moral above everyone else. Atticus Finch was even named the best movie hero of the 20th century by the American Film Institute in 2003. Peck wasn't just so tall that he filled the screen. Gary Cooper, it filled the idea of a guy who stands for something bigger than himself. We can all be proud of how he has conducted himself in our business over the years with us. When Gary Cooper came to Hollywood, he brought a different kind of height story with him. In the 1930s, he was also 6 feet 3 inches tall when he walked into a room. And that was what made him unique at a time when most American men were only 5 feet 7. People who first met him thought he was almost too good to be true. Going to Montana as a child made that impact stronger. He was born Frank James Cooper in 1901 on the 7 Bar 9, a huge 600-acre ranch. As a child, he had access to fresh air, hard work, and good food that many Americans didn't have at the time. His parents, who were both British immigrants, thought schooling was important enough to send him and his brother to Bedfordshire's Dunstable School in 1909. He got his long, lean body from working on a field and following English rules. By the time he got to Hollywood in 1924, he was 6 feet 2.5 inches tall. Even so, Cooper often said he was only 6 feet 2 inches tall. Actor Brian Ahern said that Cooper once snuck up behind him and whispered, "Never admit to 6 feet 3 inches." It was as if Cooper thought that his height would make people less interested in his roles. However, film critics and even his daughter, Maria Janice Cooper, later said that he was closer to 6 feet 4 inches. Old movies also show that to be true, as he was a little taller in some of them than stars like John Wayne and Charlton Heston, who were already pretty tall. It was even harder for wardrobe departments because he wore a large size 14. For almost every show, they had to order boots especially for him. In the early 1930s, his height almost turned out to be a problem, even though it looked like a plus. Cooper passed out from working too much in May 1931. His tall frame weighed about 185 to 187 pounds at rest. It was hard work making movies from 1929 to 1931, though, and he lost a lot of weight. He was 148 pounds at one point. His plan never changed. 10 movies in 2 years. Days that went from 14 to 16 hours long, and sometimes all the way up to 23. He would make one movie during the day and another at night. His body started to break down. He got anemia, jaundice, and was totally worn out. While this was going on, he was stuck in a painful emotional triangle with his bossy mother Alice and his jealous lover Lupe Villas. Their constant fighting wore him down until he finally lost it. He had a full mental breakdown after finishing I Take This Woman in 1931. The company let him go to get better, and he went to Europe from Hollywood. To get better, he went to Rome to stay with Countess Dorothy de Frasso at the Villa Madama. They even took a 10-week vacation in Africa, which helped him get better. When he came back in 1932, he had put on weight again, gotten his balance back, and made a new deal for $4,000 a week, which is about $84,000 today. He also asked for a lighter routine and kept it that way because he didn't want to hurt himself again. Cooper's big body had another old twist to it. Long before Hollywood, he hurt his hip in a car crash in England in 1914, while he was still in school. He was told by his doctor that horseback riding would help strengthen his hip, but the exercise wasn't valid. The hip didn't heal properly, it did so in a way that left him with a stiff leg and a very noticeable crooked walk. What could have stopped him? It became a part of his film persona in the end. The way he walked made him look like a real cowboy, not a performer. He got to Los Angeles in 1924, when he was 23 years old, broke and looking for any job he could find. Two Montanan friends put him in touch with film actors and low-budget Western sets on Poverty Row. He met rodeo winner Jay. He met Slim Talbot at a casting call and worked with him as a stunt double and stand-in for more than 30 years. He got $5 a day as an extra and $10 for tricks. It was hard work. He had to jump off horses that were moving and land on the hard desert floor. A lot of men got hurt, but Cooper kept going because that was the only way he could make money to live and save for art school. He began to be in silent movies like The Thundering Herd and Wild Horse Mesa in early 1925. Between 1925 and 1926, he was in 17 movies without being recognized. This helped him learn how cameras worked and how to control his body on screen. On June 1, 1926, he finally made a real deal with Samuel Goldwyn Productions to work for them for $50 a week. He got his first big part that same year in The Winning of Barbara Worth, performing with Ronald Colman and Vilma Bank. When it first came out on October 14, 1926, the movie was a big hit. The tall trick writer who walked funny wasn't an extra anymore. This was the start of his rise to fame.